Good evening. Welcome to my channel called Silver Slumbers. We have a special guest in tonight's video. His name is Nocturn. He's also a horror narrator, and he specializes in writing creepypastas, and I narrated his stories on my other channel. We are also good friends outside of narrating. So today, he's going to be reading stories with me to help you get those soothing Z's that you deserve. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing, as it helps me get my videos out there. So tonight, we got some great news. Today, we got a sponsor, and this will only take 1 minute of your time. So here we go. Today, we have an incredible sponsor. Say hello to BenQ. As you know, my goal is to give this community the best listening experience as possible. And that's why I'm thrilled to introduce you to BenQ's treVolo U desktop dialogue speaker. This speaker is designed to enhance your audio experience, whether you use it for audiobooks, podcasts, online learning, or just simply listening to my videos. I personally use a speaker to listen to soothing music, and it does the job. It is also very easy to use. Setting it up is a breeze. Just connect it to your device via Bluetooth, and it's ready to use. This compact speaker is just the right size to place anywhere since it doesn't take much space. It also has a companion app that pairs with the speaker. What's great is that you can customize your audio profile that fits to your listening needs and get the best possible experience. It has a depth camera on the front so it can detect how loud the speaker needs to be for your environment. If you were looking to transform the way you listen, I recommend investing in a speaker such as treVolo U and dive into the sea of bliss. I'll leave a link to the Amazon page and BenQ's website in the descriptions. Thank you BenQ's audio team for the sponsor. In today's video, Nocturn and I are going to be reading True Online Dating Stories, Volume 1. So sit back, relax, and close those eyes. And remember, don't get lost in the dark. Warning, some of these stories have sexual words, so I'll be replacing them with passionate affection. Viewers' discretion is advised. Hello again. I've posted here a few times about some of my creepy experiences, which have received some positive feedback, so I thought I'd share another. So back in 2014, when I was 21, I was on and off again with a toxic relationship and was trying to get over him and moved on. So I decided to give dating online sites a crack. I tried a few, met a few guys, some decent that never went anywhere, and some were just plain looking for passionate affection or had some serious issues. I haven't dated since high school, as I've been in a 2 long-term relationship fairly close together with people that I've known for quite a while. As I'm sure you can imagine, I was clueless. I wasn't used to guys trying to trick me into passionate affection or leading me on, or even how dating really worked. How many days after the date do I have to do to wait for him to text me back? After a few failed attempts to find someone, I thought I'd broaden my horizons and really try to find someone serious. At the time, I was talking to a couple of guys. The one that stood out was a really nice guy, if not slightly simple, who had a lot in common with me. His name was Liam. I didn't want to put my eggs in a basket, so I started talking to another guy that wasn't really my type, physically or mentally, but he was smart and funny, so I thought I'd see how things played out. Seeing as most of the guys I pick, based on gut feelings, turned out to be terrible for me. This man who I nicknamed Guy, I can't remember why now, but it was a running joke between us. He was very persistent and very cocky, which I wasn't really into, but he seemed like a cool guy on the other hand. He was very knowledgeable, quick-witted, and easy to talk to. We spoke on the phone a few times, and it was a reasonably good experience, but there was something about him that I really didn't like. As I mentioned previously, he was quite cocky and used to do a little annoying things like hang up without saying goodbye and had an arrogant, pushy demeanor. One day on the phone, I pulled him up to it and told him that I believed that it was all a front and that he wasn't that arrogant, and he was a lot nicer than he let on. He told me he had an ex-girlfriend who he broke up with him because he was too much of a pushover. So he decided that women like guys who were all arrogant. I told him that I didn't like that at all. And I spoke to him because I felt like there was something more than that on his personality. I also picked him up on little things on his profile, such as liking fat chicks and other things. I am a bigger girl, so I asked him if that was a problem, to which he responded, it wasn't. He had just written that to make himself look better. I accepted his excuse and hoped for the best. I decided I need to try different kinds of men if I wanted to find someone, so I gave Guy a chance. He often suggests meeting over at his place to eat pizza and watch movies, which I wasn't quite comfortable with. So I suggested he come over out to a club with friends, which he declined and tried to convince me to come back to his place, to which I really wasn't keen on. After he clicked on that I wasn't coming over to his house in the middle of the night, he suggested we go out for coffee. As I didn't drive, he suggested that he pick me up, which I really didn't think was a good idea, but agreed in the end. We decided to go on to a local coffee shop and I was quite fond of, which was open throughout the night. At around 8, he picked me up and we exchanged pleasantries. And once we were seated, I was genuinely surprised of his attentiveness and how much interest he displayed, asking me many questions about myself. Still, something didn't sit right. It wasn't that I didn't like him. There was just something that made me feel uncomfortable. All went well. We chatted about this and that until questions took a strange turn. Have you ever just kissed anyone just simply because you were in the mood? He asked rather quite loudly, considering we were in a crowded cafe. I was taken aback and quite embarrassed and hesitant before stuttering, no, not really. I think that's more of a male thing. I can't say I've done that. No. I know that sounds sexist, but shut up, I was under pressure. Anyway, he then asked me a few more innocent questions before switching topic back, asking if I would like to do oral affection on another oddly worded questions that I can't remember. Passionate affection questions that were unusual. I lately told him that it was rude to ask me that, but still was tolerant of him. I've encountered many douches, and at that time I felt like I wouldn't get much better. Not long after this, he suggested we leave. By this, I thought he meant part ways, as he knew I had to meet up with a friend not long after coffee. I was wrong. We went to the counter. He offered to pay, but to which I declined. Luckily, he did because, ironically, I left my wallet at home. I felt like it was super cliche, but felt super guilty as it makes me feel bad when someone else pays for me. When we got to the car, he started to drive a different direction to where I lived, which was 5 minutes away. I asked where we were going and he pulled up to a street nearby with little to no street lights. It was extremely dim and he parked outside of a random house. I asked him what we were doing here, and he told me he wanted to talk in private, to which I responded that we could talk in private out in front of my house. He argued that it wouldn't be private because people would just look out of the window. I stupidly told him that no one would, because only my sister was home, and I would text her not to. He kicked up a bit and got slightly angry before agreeing to take me home. This should be enough for me, but no. I was naive and lonely. When we parked out front of my house, we started talking and he kept trying to lean in to kiss me, to which I kept pulling away and giving off negative body language, but still was friendly. After a bit, he started asking me to look at him. I make jokes to clear the tension. It was a bad habit. Anyway, this was to keep my distance until he basically turned my head and kissed me. I just went with it, as I was lonely and thought he wasn't that bad looking, and I had a reason that a kiss would just be a kiss. After a few seconds, I tried to pull away and he pulled into me into a bear hug, to which I half-heartedly tried to get out of, but gave up and continued kissing him. A little while later, I try to pull away, but he puts me in an almost headlock type hold. Still, somehow, I wasn't concerned enough to get the F out of there. We stopped kissing after a bit and continued talking. He asked if I sit on the back with him to cuddle, to which I hesitantly said, "Yes." Once we got into the back, we cuddled and talked a bit, but he kept grabbing my chest in private areas. I just kept telling him to stop because he was starting to make me mad. He was doing it in a joking way like, "Oops, sorry, accidentally brushed your chest." I didn't take it too seriously until it happened a few times, and I told him that he had his feel, and that's enough. I wasn't good at saying no to men back then. Not that it's any excuse. After a couple times, I'd said that I was moving to the other side of the car so he couldn't touch me. I sat there and continued talking when all of a sudden he reached out and pulled for me for a cuddle. He was playing with my hair when all of a sudden he pushed my head down, hair wrapped around his hands. I was confused and tried to pull back up, but he was roughly pushing it down again. I realized what he was doing. I don't know how I did. The guy was around 6'2" and around 120 kilograms, which is 265 pounds, but I managed to get myself out of his grip and get out of the car. As I was getting out, he yelled at me to come back, that he didn't do anything. "You know what you effing did? Thanks for the effing coffee," I said as I slammed the door into his face. I walked quickly but steadily to my front door, even though I was petrified, as I didn't want to give him a satisfaction of seeing me running. He continued yelling out that he has done nothing wrong as I was walking. I banged down my front door, and my younger sister opened it to see me in tears. I told her what happened and eventually settled down. I swiftly blocked him on Facebook and vowed to never talk to him again. I kid you not. 3 days later, while working, I received a text message from him. Guy said, "Hey, do you want to grab coffee tonight?" I said, "No." Guy said, "Why reply then?" After an hour of no response, he texts back. Guy said, "I see what you did there. Tongue sticking out emoji." I replied, "I'm just curious. Why do you even bother asking?" Guy replied, "Because I think you're cute. I'm curious why you're answering." I replied back, sending a picture that reads, "You smell like hidden motives. Get away from me." He replies back, "Pretty sure my motives tasted fine when my tongue was down your throat the other night." I never made contact with him again, and I blocked his number. A few years later, I was telling someone about him and decided to unblock him on Facebook to show her, when I decided that I now had a mutual friend. The mutual friend was a girl that I had been extremely close with in high school, who confessed to me that she'd been assaulted from a child onward. I was the only one that she ever told, and I helped her to find the courage to put that piece of crap away. So naturally, I freaked and messaged her. I told her the whole story, and she was stunned. She told me that he worked with her, and now lectured something to do some justice at a local university, which was laughable. She told me that he harassed her for months about going on a date with him, and would occasionally get quite nasty. And all the time she knew him, she felt uncomfortable around him, even when he was nice. He chopped and changed quite regularly, apparently, and she kind of felt intimidated most times. He would guilt, pressure, and have to go on with her about this date and not message him back, etc. Full on, almost stalkerish. She ends up getting a boyfriend, and he was furious. And she didn't hear him after that. Judging by our time frames, she met him around 6 or 3 months after I did. I'm sure I've left some minor details out just because it's all blurry, and my dad died after the event with him. So if I remember anything else, I'll add to it. Thank you for reading. So creepy ex-boyfriend, let's never meet again.
I divorced my first wife back in 2012. Long story short, on top of many issues she had, her infidelity was the last straw for me. I've since remarried and have a beautiful baby boy. Shortly after the divorce, while I was single, my ex-wife would contact me out of nowhere, apologizing for everything and asking for me back. I would kindly tell her no and wish her the best. She would then immediately flip out on me, calling me a jerk and blah blah blah, reassuring my decision that this divorce was definitely the right thing. This happened a handful of times over the next year or two. A few years later, I married the type of woman every man dreams about. Independent, intelligent, funny, generous, caring, selfless, and beautiful to top. Within weeks of us getting married, my wife and all of her close friends received a friend request on Facebook from a very suspicious profile. Again, my wife is very intelligent, and with a little bit of detective work, concluded without a doubt that the fake profile was in fact my ex. She kindly sent her an instant message letting her know she wasn't fooling around. And wouldn't you know, the profile disappeared. This same thing has happened several times over the past few years. A year ago, we became parents. That is when things got really bad. Along with social media stalking came actual stalking. I would notice her car parked down the street from my house. I would make a point to walk towards it, and it would suddenly drive off. We finally ended up getting off social media for the privacy of our family. I found out later, through a friend, that she had gotten remarried as well. Kicker to that is, she married a dude with the same first name as my wife. Craziness starts. One morning I woke up to a very odd text message. The person was claiming to be a friend of mine who I had dated at one point following my divorce, asking if I wanted to meet up for copulation. I found it very odd that that friend is very classy, and it wasn't like her to do that. The next morning, I called the number back that it came from, and wouldn't you know, 'twas the voicemail of my ex. Ugh. I was furious. I called again later that day and managed to get her to answer. She denied sending the text and claimed that the phone was stolen. Really? I then received some very colorful voicemails from her, in which she proved herself to be unstable. Over the next few weeks, my wife and I continued to receive very concerning text messages here and there from burners. I'm watching you. How's my dog? I got him in the house in the divorce. And finally, better take good care of that baby. That was it for me. I reported what I felt to be threatening messages to the police. They told me that they couldn't do anything about the messages that came from burners because there was no way to prove it was her. They were useless. My next course of action was to get restraining order against her. This was easily accomplished by utilizing the odd text message in which she claimed to be another person, as well as the colorful voicemails. The best part is that I was feeling it as being fearful for my safety, as well as the safety of my family. The order would also have to be made public and presented to anyone and everyone she lives with, meaning her husband and in-laws. That means they would get to see the screenshots of the trashy text messages and read the dialogue of the voicemails she left. That would be entertainment at its finest. The tricky part now was just getting her served. I hired a private service company to serve her the restraining order. However, I assumed she would see this coming. My ex is one of those gals who bought a camera and suddenly started calling herself a photographer. She has a Facebook page. My wife had the idea to have someone message her and set up an appointment for a photo shoot at a park or something for senior pictures. That friend came through with flying colors. On the day she was to get served, my wife and I drove to the park for front row seats. I spotted her sitting in her car waiting for her client. I then called the server to direct him to her location. He kept me on speaker so we could hear the whole thing go down from the distance. It was wonderful. We watched the service officer slowly pull up next to her car, both cars facing the same direction. He then got out of his car and walked around, walking up to her side window. We heard him knocking on the window through the phone, and her driver's window rolled down. From the distance we were, we could still make out the puzzled look on her face. Ashley Smith? Fake name, obviously. Yes? I'm an officer from the court for Blank County, and these documents are for you. What is it? You have been served. Have a nice day. He then walked back around to his car and pulled away. Him and I shared a short laugh over the phone, and I thanked him for his help. I was shocked to hear him laugh over the whole thing. I guess it would be kind of fun to ruin people's day for a living. With the big yellow envelope in her hand, I drove by her in my way out of the parking lot as she sat in the driver's seat of her car. I slowed down to make sure she saw me. She looked like a deer in headlights. With my passing by, she now knew what was in the envelope without even opening it, I assume. Haven't heard much from her since. I did hear from a friend that day who knew what was going down, that her Facebook page had been taken down that evening. I'm assuming she did it out of shame, or her husband was so livid with her that she got grounded.
I was 21, recently became a police officer, and was recently dumped. So my friend suggested Tinder. As a 21-year-old and a new cop, I had the I'm invincible and I could take on anyone mentality. I matched with a very good-looking and out-of-my-league female. We chatted and eventually set up a date to meet. She said she had a great open field to look up at the stars and hang out, and we could meet up at her house. So the night came. I was excited, and she seemed to be excited when I picked her up. She guided me to the field, and wow, it looked nice. Open space, woods, deer, and other wildlife. In the field, I noticed something really dim of headlights in the distance. Then the van started driving towards us and pulled up in front of us, almost close enough to block me to going forward. I told her to stay in the car and I'll go say hi. I grabbed my flashlight that I had in my car and I walked up to them. In the front driver's side of the van, there was a decently sized man. I asked him what's going on and if he can just back up his car a little bit. He was very polite. He said he was the owner of the property and said that he didn't mean to scare us. He told me he's been having a lot of trouble with poachers on his property and just wanted to make sure that we weren't going to be shooting anything. I ensured them that we were the only one out here looking at the stars and watching the wildlife. He was perfectly okay with that. Told me to have a nice date and he drove off. After that, the girl was texting nonstop. Around an hour later, I saw headlights coming towards us again, this time at a very fast pace. We hopped into the car and I moved it to a more defensive position. The same man came close enough to almost hit my car. My date hopped out of the car at the point where she ran towards the guy. I immediately knew that I was screwed. I got out and gave them commands to back up and get on the ground. Neither of them complied. Obviously, he then proceeded to charge at me and knock me to the ground. Luckily, I was able to get him on his back and get up. I then saw my date grab a metal pipe from their van. She told me that they had a gun and to give them my money and truck and I won't get hurt. I felt betrayed. Of course, with my I'm invincible mentality, I said no. She started to cry and saying that they didn't want to hurt me. He then started to go back towards the car. At that point, I told them both that I was a cop. I drew my concealed firearm and to lay on the ground. After a moment of shock from all of us, they complied. I was able to contact 911, tell them my name and badge number. I had two of them at gunpoint, and I immediately needed backup. I gave our dispatcher the best directions I could possibly say in this field. While I was on the phone, they both fled. Again, a stupid new cop, young guy mentality. I chased after them. I took after the man who ran into the woods across the field. I chased him for maybe 30 seconds and heard 3 loud pops, and I saw a muzzle flash. My invincible mentality went right out of the window. I ran like hell back towards my car and peeled out of there. I went back to the area and called dispatch again and had officers come to that location. Of course, the first officers to pull up was my sergeant and field training officer. Of course, they were both completely understanding and didn't give me crap about it at all. The most used words were dumbass and stupid effing rookie. I hopped into their car and went towards the field. Luckily, the van was still there. I was told to shut my mouth and only come out if they started getting shot at. They cleared the area and started looking in the van. They found meth right on the center console and they searched the car. What scared me the most was when my field training officers and sergeant came back to the patrol car, led me out, and told me to come look at the back of the van. Both of them were pale, looked horrified, and I went to the back of the van where there were several knives, duct tape, lighter fluid, a decent amount of rifle ammunitions, handcuffs, and what looked like to be dried blood. In the front seat passenger side, we found an AR-15 style rifle and 2 more handguns. We immediately called for backup and detectives. When they investigated the blood, it turns out that it wasn't actually blood. The plates had been stolen and the van was reported stolen. I still get crap about the whole encounter, but luckily, no one got hurt. I will never use online dating sites ever again.
We lived about 25 minutes from each other, so agreed to meet at the beach pier, about halfway between. Before meeting, we had been texting, and he seemed totally normal. I was already at the pier when he texted me saying he can't meet me there because his license is revoked, and it's too far for him to walk. I should have just left then, but I agreed to meet him at a pizza place closer to him. I got there and I'm standing outside when I see him, and I quickly realize the pics from his profile were at least 3 to 5 years old. Homeboy looks like the dollar store version of himself. Greasy, looks like he hasn't showered in days. Hair undone, holes in his shirt. I awkwardly gave him a side hug and suggested we get a seat. And he says, "Oh, no, we're not getting pizza. Let's go to the park." I awkwardly said, "Okay." As he talks, I realized his gums and tongue ring are stained black from smoking. By this point, I'm completely turned off, and I'm just keeping up with formalities. So we got to the park, and I found a bench to talk, and before I can sit down, homie pulls me into his lap, squeezing me and saying, "God's baby girl, you are so effing cute." I awkwardly scooched away and tried to get conversation going. He pulls out his phone and starts texting for a few minutes, not really listening to me before interrupting with, "Have you smoked?" My friend has a plug. We could go back to my place for a bowl. I declined. Oh, come on, baby girl. My place is just right there. We could have some fun, too. I declined again. Next thing I knew, he pulls me close by the face and whispers, "You're so innocent," before broad-tongued licking my face from chin to ear. Shell-shocked, I just sat there for a moment, processing what the F just happened, as he keeps talking about weed, before I decide to take an urgent phone call and leave. Okay, so I've never posted in here before, but I always read and I love to comment on people's stories. Unfortunately, I quite recently had a very scary, more like terrifying encounter. For some background information, I live in a small apartment complex right outside my campus with some friends. I am also a 20-year-old girl, so my friends were always bashing on me for never meeting up with any boys, or going. I had gotten sick of it. I didn't want to do the little friend who stayed home and eat pizza while my friends were out on dates with boys. So I signed up for Plenty of Fish. Now, I'm not the type of person who would say yes to any random stranger. They had to be nice looking. They had to have plenty of photos of themselves. And we both had to have at least 2 common interests. So with those rules in my head, I psyched myself up to join the world of online dating. Within a few days, I already had 2 boys I was talking to. One said he was a doctor, kind of hard to believe, because he was only 20. And one said he worked as a construction guy, easier to believe. I didn't like that the doctor guy was lying to me, but one day, as I was getting crap from my roommates, the construction guy, who we can call Dean, messaged me on Messenger app we were using and asked if I wanted to go out for a bite to eat. I told my roommates where I was going and who I was with. You know, all the things someone should do, so someone knows if you've been abducted. I even had a check-in time so that when my roommate texted me if things were good, I had to say some silly code word that meant things were good. If I responded to another code word, it meant, "Help me get out of this." And if I didn't use code words, then she would call the police for help. So I quickly dolled myself up and got ready for my date. I put my hair up in a classy bun, leaving straps of it hanging down around my glasses. I put on a nice white blouse and some black pants, and I was ready to go. I jumped in my car and headed out to the restaurant where Dean had chosen. It was just out of my town, but it was still only a 15-minute drive from my apartment. I arrived at the restaurant and saw him almost immediately. He was wearing nice clothes and looked just like his photos. He was waiting just outside the restaurant doors for me. His eyes lit up when they saw me. He walked over to me and smiled. We chatted a bit outside, since it was summer and not cold, and then walked inside. We ate dinner and talked about our life, and things like how school was going. I got the text from my friend, but since everything was good, I sent back the positive code word. Dean talked about how much he liked his job and things, and altogether, it was pretty nice. Except for one thing. Dean was bored. He didn't do anything exciting. or really talk enthusiastically about anything, and it was boring. It was an average date, and honestly, I didn't care to go on anymore. The next day, I woke up to the feeling of my phone vibrating nonstop. I looked at it and realized it was vibrating so much that it had fallen off of my dresser. I almost laughed. Then I saw all the messages from Dean. At first, they were all saying how much fun he had had, and that he would really like to go out again. But then the messages took a turn. They got violent and angry that I wasn't responding. It was 7 in the effing morning. I was sleeping. I noped out of that situation. I texted him back and said I'd been sleeping, and that no, I was not going on any more dates with him. I was just about to block his profile on both sites when I got a final message. Watch your back. At first I was really creeped out, but since I had blocked him on all my accounts then deleted him, he wouldn't be able to do anything wrong. Later that day, I saw a text from a random number telling me how pretty I looked in my blue PJs. I glanced outside just in time to see none other than Dean running down my road. How the hell did he get my number? I thought worriedly. I blocked that number and continued what I was doing. Later that night, I fell asleep pretty early and woke up to my phone. Text alert going crazy. It was from the number I had just blocked. Earlier that day, there were dozens of messages saying how I was going to get it. I quickly showed all my roommates the messages. They all told me that I should go to the police. But since I was stupid, I didn't. I blocked the number again and went back to sleep. But once again, I woke up to my phone buzzing. I didn't wait. I jumped in my car and drove all the way down to the police station. Once there, they told me that they couldn't do much to help, and just told me to block the number. I did. At least I had it on record. Nothing happened for a few days. The number stayed blocked on my phone for a while, but then the pictures started. They were pictures of my house, of me in my house, my car, my work. I went back to the police and finally, I was able to get a restraining order against Dean. I never received any messages from Dean again after that. I now never, ever use dating websites. So, Dean, let's hope we never meet again. If anyone has any tips on staying safe, please let me know.
Nowadays, it's so easy to connect with someone. All you gotta do is pick up your phone, download an app, and boom, now you can see all the eligible bachelors in close radius without getting out of bed. But just a year ago, something happened that changed my mind about online dating forever. I was 21 at the time and getting a bit tired of mundane life. I was scrolling through the popular dating app, and that's when I saw him. Tall, blonde, blue-eyed, pretty smile. Just perfect. We instantly matched and agreed on dinner and cuddle at his place. Yes, I know to never go to a stranger's house on the first date, but I was trying to score a home run, if you know what I mean. I showered, slipped on my favorite pair of shoes, threw on a big t-shirt and shorts, rubbed my favorite perfume, and I was out of the door. When I pulled up to his 3-story townhouse, I thought, his living arrangement seems to match up with his line of work, so of course I had no doubt that he was who he said he was. I go up to the door and knock. About 15 seconds later, the most handsome man I've ever laid eyes upon opened the door. We instantly connected. We dated for about 4 weeks, when one day he comes to look over at me and says, "Can I tell you something?" "Well, yeah, of course, babe," I quickly answered, eager to hear what he has to say. He looks me dead in the eyes, straight face, and says, "When I saw you on the app, I planned on killing you." His hand reaches over and caresses mine. But then, I changed my mind. Chills went down my spine as I knew that he wasn't joking. Completely paralyzed in fear, I just stared at him. I was unable to speak. I couldn't move. He moves in closer and says, "Babe." That's when I snapped out of it. I grabbed my purse and ran out of his house, blocked and deleted his number, and quite frankly, deleted the whole app. So, hot guy from dating app, let's never, ever meet again.
Backstory. I used to do a lot of online dating because the city where I live is very hard to meet people in. Everyone kind of keeps to themselves. I met this particular champ on OkCupid. I guess you could say I go for a certain type of guy. Tall, handsome, well-dressed, driven, intellectual, with a touch of hipster and geek thrown in there. I guess you could say I have a high standard. Therefore, I spent a lot of time screening potential dates with extended messages, chatting or texting before we meet in person. I like to believe that because I basically raised myself on the internet, I have a good sixth sense for creeps and weirdos, and I call it my FIF, funny inner feeling. George was everything I seemed to be looking for. He rocked a pompadour and a 6 o'clock shadow with ease of Ryan Gosling. His profile was rife with eloquent language, and his messages to me were flowering and deep. We touched upon philosophy, literature, fantastic music, and I was quickly smitten. We started texting, and our texts were similarly full of excellent vocabulary and unique conversation topics. One chilly fall night, I went out with some of my friends to an independent hip-hop night, and I drank more whiskey sours than I care to admit. Well, sober walnut while may not have been so reckless. Tipsy walnut while felt like texting George at 1 a.m., asking him if he wanted to meet up for pizza. Felt like a good idea. After all, spontaneity generally leads to good things and excellent adventures, right? I walked into the pizza place and saw George sitting amidst all the empty tables, awaiting me. He was even more beautiful than in his photographs, and my heart skipped a beat. Our conversation rambled and wavered itself for hours. We had an excellent rapport, and I felt entirely at ease with this man. That's when, at around 5 a.m., he offered to take me to his house to watch a movie he had made. I was not alarmed, however. I very firmly told him I would be happy to accompany him home, but I was not the sort of woman who found the first date. With a smile that dented his dimples, he told me he respected that and linked his hand with mine. We practically skipped to his home, still babbling wildly at one another. I was so full of excitement. I felt that he had a real, tangible connection, and we reached his abode. I became even more impressed. He lived in the basement of a massive old mansion. He had 5 roommates, all women and all professional artists. As we tiptoed down the stairs to his lair, I was assaulted on all sides by good taste, and that only continued as we hit his cave, full to the brim of awesome art, interesting artifacts. I found myself even more fascinated with him. We both curled up on his bed comfortably, enjoying one another's company as he queued up the student film he had made a few years prior. It was some sort of 3D mess of colors and lines set to brain, but truth be told, we weren't paying much attention to it. George stared at me, and then he went in for that kiss. And when he pulled away, he had changed. His mellow, happy attitude had intensified, but not in a sexy way. His eyes had turned stony, his features had sharpened, and his grip on me tightened. I'm James Bond, you know. I giggled nervously. Suddenly, all my alarm bells were going off at once. I'm sorry? I've never seen the movies. His eyes narrowed as he regarded me. What I'm saying is, don't get too close. Don't get close at all. What? We had been having such a great time. I was incredibly confused with this sudden Jekyll and Hyde personality switch. Let's, watch your movie. Attempting to back out of the situation gracefully, and thinking perhaps he just showed nervousness strangely. I inched slightly away from him and leaned back, trying to appear nonchalant as I fixed my eyes to the TV screen. In reality, I was on alert, every nerve in my body ready for fight. I'm a big girl, not fat, just tall and Amazonian. George was about the same height and build as me, and I knew I could probably take him if something happened. But I wanted to tactfully extract myself from the situation before that could happen. Backing off seemed like the wrong thing to do. I felt George tense beside me before he jumped on top of me, trying to force his hand up my skirt. George, I protested past his reaching tongue. I told you I'm not going to F on my first date. My heart was beating, a drumline in my chest, and I didn't want to become violent in case something even worse happened. But I was pushing him off of me as intensely as I dared. Then why the F did you come over to my house in the middle of the night? I told you, I'm James Bond. As he bellowed in my face, I shoved him off of me, and I stood up all in one quick motion as I snatched up my purse and charging phone as quickly as possible. His demeanor stiffened again. Look, Walnut Well, I'm sorry. I can't. My ex-girlfriend, she really effed me over, you know? I'm broken. I can't love. He opened his arms, trying to get me to come to him again. Something deep within me twinged, some inkling of compassion for this suddenly broken man in front of me. But I knew it was a ploy. I buttoned up my jacket and shoved on my hat. I need to go home. Again, his expression changed. He set his jaw and a flash of hatred passed his visage. Fine. Effing fine. I'll walk you out. No, that's okay, I protested. No, I said I'm going to walk you out. Meekly I nodded. I made a beeline to the basement door, fumbling with the lock until I was free into glorious, frigid early morning sunshine, my breath fogging in front of me. George followed me like a kicked puppy. At the gate, I paused to say goodbye to him, full of confusion and regret. He stared at me, the man I had met earlier that night, all gentleness and handsome aloofness. Then he grabbed both of my arms in a vice grip and attempted to kiss me. I turned my face sideways and he collided with my cheek, and his fingers tightened around my arms, so hard that I had bruises the next day. George, you're hurting me. George, I need to catch my bus. Wordlessly, he released me, stonily watching me walk away until I rounded the corner. I haven't heard from him since then, but I've seen him at the bars, and he is always laughing and looking perfectly normal and approachable.
So I met a guy online recently that seemed sweet and kind. I decided to set up a date on Friday, and everything is going well. That is until yesterday. I get a message him telling me that he wants to hang out tomorrow morning, and I agreed to it, thinking that we could just go over to Starbucks, and he agreed to pick me up at a time. I go to sleep with a smile on my face. Instead, I wake up to a phone call around 8 in the morning. Surprised, I answered it, and it was my date. Hey, are you up yet? I just woke up. I don't care how you look. Also, your mom freaked me out. My mom? Yeah. She saw me parked across your house. She waved and I waved back. She was kind of creepy. What time did you come over here? 5:30 in the morning. My heart sinks. I had no idea that someone I was casually meeting for a coffee would show up super early to my house and wait for me to wake up. After the phone call, I check my messages. I see messages from 5 in the morning. A picture of my house with a text message saying, "Do you live here?" The next message says, "Someone spotted me, so I moved," along with a picture of the neighbor's house nearby. Obviously, I was freaked out myself and knew that my mom and neighbors were probably equally freaked out. I start panicking, texting my friends on my phone, desperate to see if anyone was awake that could help me about this situation. I get one reply on the group text, but out of fear of judgment, I lie to her, saying that I got the situation handled. I convince myself to go out and confront this guy. "Hi, princess. How are you?" I noticed him on my neighbor's yard, probably trying to look for me in their windows. Shaking, I try to fake a smile and let him hug me. He then goes in and goes for a kiss, wet and messy and with tongue. I felt frozen on what to do. I try to tell him that coming to my house at 5 in the morning wasn't a cool thing to do, but he gives the excuse that he wanted to beat traffic and he was just not that sleepy, as he works night times. I try to see things from his perspective and shake it off. I go off in his car, and he and I try to have something close to a regular date, which usually doesn't include groping, licking my neck multiple times, and talking about marriage right away so I can have his baby. I managed to convince him to drop me off away from my home and let me walk back to my house. That is, until I realized that he was following me in his car. And when I asked about it, he asked if I wanted him to walk me to my house. Even more scared, I told him no, and I managed to escape. By the time I arrive home, I'm in tears and extremely shaky. I text him that I don't think we're compatible and to never come near me or my family ever again. In response, he tells me I'm crap. From that, I'm going to be thinking about taking a break from online dating. So creepy guy that stayed outside my house at 5 in the morning, let's never meet again. thank you Nova Nocturn for joining me on this collab on true online dating stories. If you enjoyed our guest, Nova Nocturn, please consider visiting his channel and subscribing. Please, if you guys have any more suggestions of video topics, please let me know in the comments and on the community tab. Also, I'm going to be making a playlist for raining sleeping videos and have certain selected videos that I think will be ideal for a good night's sleep, because I am well over 8 hours of content that I could put into a playlist. So go over and check out the playlist tab. I'll have it named as 8+ hours of slumber videos. Thank you again. I want to thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoy these stories. If you are asleep, well, maybe you can hear me in your dream world. Keep dreaming, as it's the only time we can escape reality. And I'll let you listen to the rain. Enjoy the slumber world.